almost gonna die.
So back into this, though, we see the bombardment at Veracruz. Unfortunately, though, Santa Anna is like refusing to admit defeat, and so our Army and our Navy will kind of take a two-sided prong attack there at Veracruz. And despite the continued fighting and the fact that the old Fuss and Feathers General Winfield Scott is able to enter into Mexico City and capture Mexico City by September 14th, largely through a lot of hand-on-hand combat, the Mexicans for a long time refused to give up. The Mexican army was very, very adept to using guerrilla-style warfare, and quite frankly, the United States and most of the rest of the world, for that matter, were not there with using guerrilla warfare. Most of us, we tried to use gentleman's warfare. We do up until World War I. Yes, still. Yes. We tried to keep doing it up until World War I. It's not really effective, but you know, yeah, because machine guns. Problem.
Germany figured it out and never got World War I.
Yeah. And we use it a little bit in the Revolutionary War, and we use it a little bit in the Civil War, but most predominantly, what's being used is gentleman's style warfare. So the idea that, or finally after the capture of Mexico City, we're finally able to convince Santa Anna to settle and to reach an agreement. The United States will send this guy, Nicholas Trist, down to negotiate an armistice with Mexico. He basically tells Mexico, look, we will give you 10 million pesos in exchange for this lost territory. But at the same time, Polk, despite this negotiation, he argues that Trist is actually not doing what Polk wants him to do. Polk argues that we should not be paying Mexico quite so much. And Polk believes that Nicholas Trist is attempting to accept a bribe directly from Mexico for negotiating this. So he actually fires Nicholas Trist and tells Nicholas Trist to come home, that basically, get out of Mexico, I don't want you here anymore because you're not doing exactly how I want you to do this. And Nicholas Trist refuses to come home. He, FYI, has just committed treason because he's disobeyed a direct order from the commander-in-chief. And so Trist, as this American negotiator, though, is effectively, even though he's been fired, able to effectively negotiate the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, thus ending the war. So in a way, the treaty really isn't valid because of the fact that he was fired.
So you could argue we still have war.
Yeah, you could kind of make that argument. I mean, it's eventually Congress accepts the treaty, so I mean, like, but until Congress accepts and ratifies the treaty, it seems as though we're not actually, in reality, all done. But Santa Anna, basically, he gets the money from the United States as part of this negotiation, and ultimately the United States will negotiate with Mexico to pay Mexico about $15 million for this territory. Santa Anna, again, another great reason to love Santa Anna, he literally takes the $15 million US and takes off.
Where's he go?
He runs into South America and goes into hiding.
Why? Just him? Just that money for him?
Yeah, so he takes the $15 million and he goes himself.
No way.
Yes way.
Holy crap.
So what do the Mexican people currently?
They hate him, but I don't know if they currently still hate him, but they hated him for a long period of time. Ultimately, the United States, in the end of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, we will see that the United States will pay that $15 million, which Santa Anna runs away with. So really, Mexico only gets about $3.5 million, which is the money that American citizens owed to Mexico for damages and claims that were made against American citizens by the state of Mexico. But ultimately, also, we get half of Mexico for basically $3.5 million, when originally we offered to pay for all of that California, one of the offers was for $30 million, and prior to the start of the war. So if you look at this, the United States comes out swinging. when it comes to what we get out of it. Plus, we get, of course, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, parts of Colorado, and even a little bit of Wyoming, the tiny little corner of Wyoming, all becomes part of the United States. Trist ultimately, although he is still like the one negotiating the treaty, Trist doesn't get his job back, so he remains like fired. It kind of falls by the wayside as a negotiator. It is approved by the Senate in a vote of 38 to 14. Okay. However, those individuals that did not approve it, the 14, it's largely because of the fact that they believed that, again, that this was part of a larger Southern conspiracy. And Calhoun basically, remember the great compromiser, goes to everybody and he's like, just sign the stinking treaty already. Let's just be done with this. Let's move on. Sign the treaty. But ultimately, the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo brings up huge issues for the United States. What happens to this territory? What do we do with this territory? How do we settle this territory? What do we do for the American Indian population that lives in this territory? What about the Mexicans who are in this territory? Well, guess what? They just magically all of a sudden become Americans.
Cool.
Okay? So the Mexicans that were residing in the American Southwest are now Americans. In an instant.
Congratulations.
Okay? Congratulations, you're an American now.
Do the Native Americans in the Southwest speak Spanish?
Some do, yes, but most it's native languages.
Okay, it's like Navajo.
Okay? Just like it was with like the Seminole tribe.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay. But we see kind of this huge chunk of land, right? And now what do we do with that? Okay. The war itself, although only 17 months long, will cost the United States $100 million. So even though we don't pay Mexico that much for the land, it costs the United States a great deal. We have 13,000 Americans that died, more than 13,000. Most of it is from disease. Again, now it brings up this issue of slavery, the balance of power. Latin America will look at the United States as being the Colossus of the North, and they retain that from that point on. And it creates lots of problems all the way up until World War I, the idea of the U.S. as the Colossal of the North. In fact, it's part of the reason why, you guys remember the Zimmerman note from last year, okay? Hopefully, or Zimmerman telegram.
The one with, hey, Mexico.
Yeah, that, hey, Mexico, if you come and side with us, Germany, okay, and you sign a treaty with us and you wage war against the United States, when we defeat Europe, while you're keeping America busy and not engaged in the war over in Europe, then we'll come and help you and you'll get back that lost territory, okay? So this has a ripple effect. Does that make sense? And ultimately, despite, I don't know, I've heard it from my mush kids that some of your teachers last year said it was the sinking of the Lusitania that brought the U.S. into World War II, or World War I. That's not accurate. Lusitania is sunk in 1915. The U.S. goes into war in 1917. If it's the Lusitania, the U.S. is not in war in 1917. It's in 1915. Does that make sense?
It helps bring American, like,